Hello and welcome to the Glazier Nation podcast. My guest this week is Nicolas Esquivel with Curtainwall Design Consulting, or maybe better known as CDC. There's a lot of questions I always want to ask consultants that I can't ask on a job site, so I enjoyed the opportunity to ask them here. Nicolas and I discussed everything consulting as it relates to fenestration, including the consultant's motivation and the most frequent errors that he sees. I had a blast chatting with Nicolas, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. If you want to get more involved with the podcast, if you have a question or you know someone that would make a great guest, you can hit us up on any of our social medias at Glazier Nation Podcast. Or if you want to get involved at the sponsorship level, go to glaziernation.com/marketing. And that brings us to our sponsor for this episode. It is Glazier Nation. Go to glaziernation.com for all their offerings. Your entire career in the United States has been with CDC?
Correct.
For 25 years?
Correct.
That's a long time, and it's all been consulting?
The first eight, almost 9 years was in the production side. The production department is where the team works for the glazing contractors, developing job drawings, calculations, and providing those services to that part of the industry.
Right.
I started there. I was a draftsman and grew into a job captain. Then I was invited to join the consulting team.
So bookmark that. CDC, bird's eye view, like someone that's tuning in that's never heard of CDC, what's kind of the elevator pitch of what CDC is? We'll get into more details as we go, but kind of what's the overall, what is CDC?
CDC has two main groups or departments. The consulting side, which is where I'm at right now, and we service architectural teams, developers, investors, and providing services and advisors. That's advisors. We work with the architectural team from the schematic design stages, helping them with the product selection, and then all the way through construction administration. The other department, the other side of CDC, is what we call production. That's engineering and drafting.
Okay.
Those services are geared towards the glazing contractors. Okay. And in fact, any other type of facade system subcontractors.
So let's take a bigger look at consulting. What you mentioned owners, architects. Why would they be motivated to hire a consulting agency instead of maybe just using a manufacturer's rep or a manufacturer's technical services, which are generally free? What's the added value of a consultant?
Well, the architectural team that is leading the project has a lot on the plate, right? I mean, they have to look at the entire thing. And most times, the architect in charge or the team of architects in charge don't have all the knowledge, all the information that we can bring to the table to that side. From the owner's perspective, they want unbiased, I guess, opinion. They want someone that can look after their interests. And we come in as a team member. I mean, we're not trying to push an agenda or making our points come across as you do this or you don't do it at all. It's not the case. We want to come in and help get the project to a successful completion.
So you come in, do you always come in at the same time at a schematic or a design?
I wish that was the case.
Sometimes it's construction.
Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes it's...
Sure.
The ideal scenario is exactly that, when we are able to go in early enough that we can provide opinion and provide a meaningful and impactful service to the client through that interaction with the architect in the early stages.
I think everyone would agree that it works in construction, no matter where they are. The earlier you're on a project, the more you can help because you can change things.
Yeah, CDC has a lot of different, a broad range of consultants. I mean, we have experience on different systems, and the guys at the company come from different backgrounds, and we have engineers, we have architects, we have people that literally was born in the industry and grew up, just like a lot of the Glaziers that we met yesterday.
But let's take the example where you do get involved at the schematic level or the design development level. How does your role change as a consultant from that level through to construction?
Assuming that we go through the whole... Yeah. It's, we tag along with the architect on those workshops they have. We assist them in the development of the specifications, detailing. We provide them with enough detail to get those construction documents to a point where they can truly be submitted for bid. And from there, we collaborate with them in the bid selection, submittal reviews. We provide opinion on any value engineering that they may receive. And then when the actual construction begins, we provide services on the field. We go there and site visits on behalf of the owner, on behalf of the architect. We visit the shops and provide reports on the progress of the fabrication. We do field testing as well.
So in the construction phase, and we've done some content with some labor subs with Ashley Klein, who's a talent advisor. She's not a headhunter, because headhunter has kind of a stigma. There's kind of some stereotypes for the labor sub that maybe are unfair. For the consultant going into the field during construction, and I heard you mention this last night, you're not always the most popular guy on the job site. I mean, I've heard glazing contractors go as far to say that the consultant is financially motivated for the glazing contractor to fail. I know that's not entirely true. I know we all want the same thing. We want a weather-tight building. But what's the consultant's point of view? Because sometimes you're going through a pretty hostile situation.
It is a challenge. It definitely, not everybody takes criticism the right way.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, just like you said, our objective is not to be the bad guy that brings bad news and tells the sub that he needs to rip it off and start new.
Yeah.
The intent is to prevent that and be able to guide, because we're not there all the time. I mean, we cannot be there 100% of the time, but
sure,
those opportunities that we get to be there, we try to make them meaningful. And it's like working together or working hand in hand and trying to understand, okay, this is how we think it should be done, or this is the reasons why. And there is backup in the industry. It's not exclusive of CDC's opinion, or this is what we want to do it. I mean, any argument that we present is based in industry standards.
Sure.
And we are just trying to make sure that that information is out there and that the sub that is working with it gets that information and appreciates the why, and not just you have to do it.
I got a question for you on testing storefront. The interior sealant.
Is it should be there or should it not?
Yeah.
Well, it does contribute, I guess, but the primary line, it all depends on where that primary line of defense is. If you look at the system, it doesn't matter what system it is. I mean, you know, there is a air-water line. If you flow from the glass through the gaskets, through the extrusions, it may be a pressure, but whatever it may be, and then onto the perimeter sealant before it reaches to the neighboring tray. Those are the critical areas. Those are the main sources of leaks. That secondary seal, it is secondary. I mean, on the interior, it does contribute to minimize the airflow, but the main line of defense, most times is on the
the way I've kind of seen that, and the way I've explained it to people too, is pretty much what you said. But example, I've seen storefront tested in a laboratory where we've cut a piece of the extrusion out and we've put plexiglass so we can see the water during the chamber event. Mm-hmm. And with the interior seal controlling the air, like you said, it's not a barrier against water. It's a barrier against the air.
It minimizes the pressure differential that sucks the water.
So without it, the water splashes and it moves and it can come up over the side
and bypass the barriers or the normal.
Right. So that's where we would say that it's part of the tested assembly. And if you're going to test, you have to test to the tested assembly. Mm-hmm. So what do you do when you test storefront? What does CDC do?
Yeah, there are occasions, and it's all in the timing, because sometimes being on the interior, that sealant may be done alongside the interior finishes, and sometimes the sequencing of events make it so that we're there when those are already in place. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we request that those be removed, and we may test up front with it and then test again without. It's just, it really depends on the whole wall assembly. It's not, when you're on site, when you're testing an installed condition, you're not testing just that system. You're testing it along with its neighbors and the perimeter sealants. And I would say anywhere between 70 to 80% of the times, I mean, those conditions on the perimeter of the unit or the system is what water is coming through. It's not the system itself, but the relationship to the neighbors.
I think that's probably a fair guess on the percentage. So, but I mean, it sounds like you have a nuanced, realistic take on the assembly. And if we
It has to be, it really is a case by case, and you need to really understand what the system is intended to do and how it works.
and the tested assembly, and it sounds like you understand we're testing this, but it's not complete, so therefore this might happen.
Yeah, and in order to be fair, especially when you're in the field, to be fair to the system, the intent of that wall, and when I say wall, I'm not just talking about the glazing system, but the entire wall, has to be at a stage where it's able to deal with the water and the air.
How many chamber tests pass on the first try?
I don't know, 50-50?
50-50.
It really, that's an interesting question. I'm just guessing. It really, there are a lot of cases, a lot of projects where we go in and we're successful on the get-go, but some others are like 2-3 times that they're still trying to find the reason for the leak.
This is kind of anecdotal evidence, but I've at least tried to explain to some people when we're doing a 8-10 pound chamber test, that's kind of equivalent, and I'm not saying it is, I'm saying this is anecdotal, to like a Cat 3 hurricane. And we need to understand, like, the chamber test is this is probably the most intense that this frame could face. I know we still have to pass the test, but do you guys kind of look at any real life or entertain your owner architect with real life explanations?
That's a very interesting argument, because one of the things that we try and encourage our guys to do is before you even get on the site, you need to have the conversation with the team. What are we going to test this to?
Sure.
Is it on the specs? If it's not on the specs, so what is the system rated for? And is everybody in agreement to that? And why not? And have that conversation up front. You're absolutely right. I mean, having that, and I confess, I need to go to my notes always, but to be able to compare that and explain it to the client.
Yeah.
This is what this means. This pressure equates to a storm that you may see every 5 years, maybe every 10 years.
Yeah.
But the system is supposed to be able to deal with that.
Yes.
That's what we're testing to that. That doesn't mean if it leaks or if we see some water, it doesn't mean that it's going to leak every time it rains. But it may be that the next storm that hits us is actually more than that, and you will see the water.
Yeah. So I want to unpack something from there. The testing. What do you see as the biggest, most frequent failure of glazing contractors? And I guess that would probably range from curtain wall to storefront to windows. But if there's one installation error or fabrication error that comes to mind, what is the one you see the most?
That transition between the glazing system and the neighboring. If it's a rain screen system, if it's a brick wall or a precast, how they are treating that joint between the two systems, that's most times the issue.
The perimeter.
Yeah.
The weakest part is the perimeter.
Yeah.
So how do you feel when your architect has a nice big curtain wall and then the GC tries to value engineer it into a storefront, steel, storefront, steel, storefront?
There's a lot of arguments there. I mean, I get it. At the end of the day, the general contractor is looking for the savings, but we try to have a conversation with the team and discuss the pros and cons. And at the end of the day, it comes to facilitating the education of the client and making sure that they understand the risk that they will be taking on if they choose to go that route.
Here's your savings. It's not a true delta because you're adding steel, you're adding brake metal, and you've added the weakest part of the system. You've multiplied it by 6.
And it's all now on the guys on the field that need to be spot on the installation. So you're putting the burden on the field instead of keeping it at the shop, where the unitized curtain will deal with it.
Another thing you mentioned was the specifications and determining how we're testing, what we're doing in the event of a failure. I find, and this goes back to, we want to get involved as early as possible, right? I find that a lot of the hostility that happens during testing is always comes back to an unclear spec. So we weren't sure if we were taking an AMA reduction, right? We weren't sure if we were testing to 12 or 8. We weren't sure if a failure means remedy and retest, or now we're testing 3
additionals. Yeah.
So, I mean, is that something that you guys have a heavy focus on?
It definitely is. And like I said a few minutes ago, if this is a project where CDC did not develop the specifications, where we were just brought in to assist with the field testing, that's like, before you leave the office, that has to be clear. It doesn't help anybody to get on the job site, to start to set up the chamber. Okay, we're ready to test. And what are we testing to?
Yes.
That's the worst time to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, the spec is intended to lead all that information, to provide it, and lead the crew, lead the team that is doing it. But if it's not clear, there has to be a conversation about it.
When you guys have the opportunity to work with the specification, is that a high priority to outline that in very good detail?
We have a dedicated team of consultants that are our spec writers. I mean, they oversee all the specs and all the projects that we collaborate with the architectural teams, and we keep it tidy and keep it.
And what do you guys? I mean, what is the ideal spec that you see for field testing? Is it manufacturers tested, or is there a field reduction? And then, like, what's the ideal situation for how do we handle a failure?
In the perfect world, no reduction. That's the system is rated for a specific to meet the specific requirements. That's what it should be tested to. That's the initial approach. But we understand that there's always pull and give a little bit of conversation about that. That's always the initial. That's where we start.
I think that's where you probably get a lot of pushback from contractors, glazing contractors, saying that field conditions are not the same as lab conditions.
Yeah, there is no doubt. That's definitely a point of disagreement. And from our position, allowing that for reduction on the testing, it compromises the value of the system in the eyes of the client. I get it. That allowance is established by the industry, but it's the industry itself that is made up of the manufacturers, right?
And I don't have an objection to testing to the full strength that it's been tested to. Where I see an issue is if it's not specified, number one. If it is specified, it should be fair game, but I think that the glazing contractor needs to have a level of quality control built into their price that they never do, because they need to be low.
And if when you say quality control, you're talking about monitoring themselves and even testing on their own, preemptively, as they go.
And there's a cost. There's a cost and a time, and they're trying to win jobs. They're trying to be the low bid. I think the GC has a lot of responsibility in that case to do better in a scope review of, hey, here's the testing parameters. Have you guys accounted for
Make
this?
sure that you account for it. Yeah. And that is also one of the points of that conversation. I mean, the general contractor has the spec book, and they are going out to get the bids, and so they need to make sure that every bid that comes in is in compliance.
I think a good team will do a good job of lowest qualified bid, right? It's not just the lowest number, it's the lowest bid that is including.
This is what we have, this is what we don't have.
But I can see how that area of the spec gets glossed over. It's usually like the last paragraph of 8,400 or whatever it is. And but if it is specified, everybody should be on board.
Yeah.
Let's start with a glazing contractor specifically. How can a glazing contractor get better at these quality control steps, or how can they get better at training their installers?
I think the certifications that are now available in the industry, those programs that we've been discussing, are a great opportunity to increase that knowledge on the guys that are actually hands-on and they're doing the installation. That's a great start to do that. Making sure that there is continuation, that there is the product, the installation, that everything that goes on is consistent. That's the word that I was looking for.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen. I mean, there is always times where multiple different crews are working on, and not all the crews or not all the crew members are exactly the same.
Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with the condition of the product at the end of the day.
And the certifications you're talking about, we did a podcast with Jeff DeLaba of AGMT, NACC. Are these kind of...
Yeah, that's an absolute... CDC has been involved in collaboration with these certifications, and we see a lot of value, and we support that type of education.
Is that something that you guys can, when given the opportunity, work into your specifications as a requirement to have those certifications?
It should be.
Yeah.
If it's not there, it definitely should be, because that is a definitive differentiator between the subcontractors, right?
Yeah.
And even though it puts additional pressure on that bidder, it definitely makes him stand out.
Well, I think it helps what we were just talking about of the specification is clear and concise, and it has our testing requirements. A way to kind of double down on that in terms of the GC doing their scope review is the certification. So during that scope review, GC, does Mr. Glazing Contractor, do you have that
certification? Yeah.
Have you looked at the testing requirements? And they can balance that. So the glazing contractor can do all that, make their job easier, make your job easier, and still make the money that they're looking to make.
Right.
So it's an even playing field.
Yeah, and to be clear, our spec, the spec that we provide to our clients includes that requirement. So it is something that it's definitely becoming part of the. It should be part of the process. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It gives the client that additional reassurance that the team that is working on is qualified.
Sure.
That they have the experience necessary to do the correct installation and avoid those pitfalls and the problems that could eventually.
So that type of, you said this is something that should be included. What, in your position, you're working with a lot of owners, architects, general contractors. I find that there's been a bit of an evolution of those groups where maybe 15, 20 years ago, they weren't as involved in a lot of the details of the glazing contractor's trade. And now I find that they are. I find that general contractors are dissecting installation instructions more often. I find that general contractors are dissecting shop drawings more often. They're looking for technical advice direct from the manufacturer more often. As these, shareholders, stakeholders in the project are getting more involved, more intelligent on our systems. What trends do you see from the consultant side of maybe requirements that maybe they're adding on, or that you could see kind of the writing on the wall that maybe glazing contractors will have to face in the near future?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, general contractors are clients of us as well.
Yeah.
We do get the opportunity to work with them. And we see that the evolution, how they may not have the level of experience of the consultant or the glazing contractor themselves, but they are definitely putting in the effort to start to understand and know what they are buying.
Well, that's one point right there, is that evolution that I'm talking about is, now there might be projects where the owner has a consultant, the architect has a consultant, the GC has a consultant.
Yeah.
So, what else do you see
that's probably one of the best scenarios, provided that everybody gets along. Because there is always differences of opinion.
How often does everybody get along when there's that?
I don't know. Most times.
Okay.
But definitely, there are certain occasions when we face those roadblocks, and we just need to sit down at the table and have a conversation and very openly discuss the facts and determine what is best for the client. And at the end of the day, the owner has the say.
So that project with multiple consultants, let's take that as an example where you have to sit down and talk. Realistically, let's say there's 3 consultants. All 3 should have the same shop drawing. They should have the same installation instructions. They should have the same specifications. is an example where maybe someone disagrees is maybe that specific consultant has a specific way that they like to do things that's maybe outside of those parameters, and then the rest of the people kind of have to bring them back into the documents?
I think it's a matter of not preference, but what is practical and what is excessive. The point of taking something beyond what is the practical approach or what is going to make that work to somewhere where it was going to look like a work of art. We're not in that business, right? I mean, so there has to be a happy medium where the requirements are met and we're not killing it beyond what is necessary.
Yeah.
And that's where the conversation comes, where we need to just discuss what are the requirements, what are the facts, what else is the icing that we could get rid of and make it efficient, make it practical.
Examples that come to mind for me would be your installation instructions and shop drawings show an exterior caulk joint and an interior caulk joint, but somebody wants two more in the middle, or a perimeter brake metal. Installation instructions show nothing. Shop drawings show it going here, but someone has an idea that they want it to go here and then up, or they want two pieces, whatever it is. Those seem like maybe ideas where we're trying to add a belts and suspenders type option, and maybe they're not necessarily required. Is that accurate?
It goes along those lines, and it's definitely each case will be different. I mean, there is no two projects alike, and having a conversation where we can actually look at the details with the group and discuss what is required, what can we do to make sure that this has a chance to perform for the duration of the life of the project, and then how can we trim the fat if there is that. Let's make it efficient. Let's make it the best possible scenario for the project and make sure that it works.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're opening as efficient and high performing as possible with as little extra bells and whistles as possible.
And if they end up having those extra bells and suspenders, why? What justifies that? I mean, what are the pros and cons of having that additional line of sealant?
Sure. And usually it's an untested assembly, so there's not a lot to go
back up. Yeah, there is no background history that tells us how the system works. So
how important is a mock-up?
Critical, especially with custom systems. If this is a brand new, recently designed system that's never been tested, that's one of the first things that we recommend to clients. And when we're talking about that type of system, it's already a high-end project, right? It's something where the owner, the architect are already thinking ahead of having that mock-up done at the test.
And in that scenario, a mock-up isn't really going to be a big cost in terms of percentage.
That's my point. I mean, they already anticipate that. I mean, when you look at the overall project cost versus the testing.
I might have said this yesterday multiple times, but the fenestration is 1% of the cost of the building, but it is 99% of the liability. So if you can,
I agree with that.
You can have a few $1,000s for a mock-up
and increase the probability of success, but do it.
Yeah, and also, you've established a benchmark that as you proceed through construction, that can always be referenced.
Yeah,
just like having a good spec, that is a good way to maybe keep tempers.
And going back to the topic of training and the glazing contractor, that is a great way to get started with the test.
I know a lot of glazing contractors that do it.
They love that
by themselves in their own facility,
and then go to the lab and do the second one. It's a great learning opportunity, a learning experience, hands-on on the actual system that you're going to be installing.
Without naming any stakeholders or glazing contractors, what is the worst mess up you've ever seen?
Oh my, where to start? It's the first one that comes to mind is not even a glazing system, but a rain screen system. It had to do, without giving away too many details, it really boils down to lack of compatible products.
Okay.
And that's a big issue.
Yeah.
And it may be applicable to glazing systems, especially when you start to look at what is that perimeter sealant doing to the neighbor or the system itself. But that lack of coordination early on to check for compatibility of products. That's probably one of the biggest issues that can create a lot of trouble.
Most of what we've discussed has been scenarios where you're brought on either during pre-con or during construction, but you and CDC do a lot of work well after occupancy. Forensic, where is this water coming from type work.
Exactly.
Where do you find the largest mistakes then? Is it different than during construction? Is it more adjacent systems? Is it still the perimeter? Is it use by the occupant? Where's the biggest mistakes coming from there, or the biggest issues, I should say?
Well, a large part of it, especially on the forensics or retrofitting that we deal with, is simply because the building is seen better days. It's an age building.
Sure.
But we've also been involved in projects recently built that we are called to find out why this is leaking. And most times we find that the reasons for the problem come back to the lack of coordination between the two trades, or the three trades that come together at that transition point. That's probably the most the issue that is more recurring.
So along those lines, I would see a lot of future trend towards, and it's happening now, of unitization of not just the glazing system, but of the entire exterior envelope. How attractive is that to a consultant, and how much of that do you see going forward?
It is happening, and the appealing part of it is most of the system is done at the shop.
Yeah.
So just like with unitized curtain wall, there is a lot better quality control. The environment is restricted, that there's not a lot of exposure to other potential risk issues. But it definitely facilitates the work, because there is a lot less that has to be done on the field and not more done up front.
I would see the attractiveness, the value for the owner, or for all the stakeholders, is that forensic example of you looking at 3 trades, 4 trades worth of work in an opening. It's one trade that owns the whole wall. So it's easy to maybe get them engaged. Also just the evolution of our machinery that can move large.
And it may not necessarily be just one trade, because I know of a system, it's
or one company.
But I'm actually thinking of a collaboration that we've seen taking place between different trades in a facility where the main bulk of the panel, prefabricated eaves panel that has the openings, the glazing contractor comes and actually do their work at the shop and pre-install the windows, the caulking is installed, the whole wall is pre-assembled in a controlled environment by the 2-3 different trades. So that's a really good opportunity to work together on that and get the better quality product. And then it's easier for any of those crews to work on a table than work on the exterior of the building, hanging off of a swing stage.
When it's either 30 degrees or 98 degrees.
Yeah.
Stakeholder, general contractor, glazing contractor wants to get a hold of CDC, wants to get CDC involved in their work. Where do they start?
Well, our website is a good starting point. I can give you my contact information, and that's always easy, just a phone call away.
Yep, we can include that in the show notes and all the content we push out.
That's the best way. Our headquarters is in Dallas. That's where I'm based. But we go all over the States and abroad. We have offices all across the United States. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we acquired Williamson & Associates. So now they became part of the CDC family and expanded our services.
Yeah. That was the guy I met.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was in just.
So Dallas, you could have worn your Rangers hat.
Hey, I have it right there, and then just I may still have my.
Congratulations to the Rangers.
Yeah.
Should have been the Phillies versus the Rangers, but
it would have been amazing, right? I mean, I don't know that this conversation would have been as friendly this morning after that. Well, who knows?
Appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for meeting you.
No,
Best success. Take care.
Great talking to you.